Welcome to episode 63 of the Talking Friars podcast. Ben Fadden here today with a special guest, Danny Vietti of CBS Sports. He also has a podcast with Will Middlebrooks. Danny, thanks so much for taking the time to talk.
Yeah, of course, Ben. Anytime, man. Always happy to talk a little ball with you.
All right, let's talk some Padres baseball. So before the year, you thought that the World Series was going to be Padres White Sox. I had, some of those same thoughts. I obviously, being a Padre fan, having season tickets was definitely, hoping for that to happen. I was obviously wasn't born in 1998 when that team was. So this was, the best team on paper assembled, in my lifetime. But what would be your updated prediction as we go into this last week of the season of who your World Series would be, if it's still the White Sox and then the NL team?
Yeah, I mean, I blame it on Tony La Russa. He ruined everything. I didn't predict Tony La Russa to be managing the White Sox, and somehow I haven't figured out why. Somehow, some way, Tony La Russa impaired the Padres from also reaching the playoffs. I don't know how, but that's my explanation for why it's not. But in all seriousness, the White Sox definitely have a shot. Now, they've struggled against good teams. They struggled against the Red Sox. They struggled against the Yankees. They did okay against Oakland. But the American League, I mean, really, I like to think it's up for grabs. I mean, Tampa Bay, of course, the defending American League champs, they are absolutely stacked. I mean, when you just consider what they've done, they got rid of their top three pitcher. I shouldn't say got rid of. Tyler Glasnow out for the season, but they got rid of Charlie Morton, who left for free agency. Blake Snell traded over to your San Diego Padres. Your top three pitchers gone. You traded away your starting shortstop and Willie Adames over to Milwaukee, who was an MVP candidate for a lot of the season. He's gone, and now they're the best record in the American League, and they're going to fight for another American League pennant for the second year straight. What Tampa Bay's done, I mean, we shouldn't be surprised at this point. It's Tampa Bay, but that's pretty incredible. And you look over in like the American League West, and you got the Houston Astros. Their lineup's absolutely stacked yet again, and that's despite losing George Springer. So, I mean, I think the American League is truly up for grabs. I mean, this American League wild card is going to come down to the finish line here. Who knows how that might pan out? I mean, the Mariners are still in it. They're a game and a half back. They have a shot because the Blue Jays and Yankees, they play each other. Somebody has to win those games. So the standings are going to shift a little bit. Boston has the easiest road. They play Washington and Baltimore to finish up the season. So they have the easiest road. You got to like their chances heading into this last week. But I hate that. Obviously, my prediction didn't hold too strong the first time, so I'm going to hold off on making any World Series prediction quite yet. But to answer your question, I mean, Chicago definitely has a shot. And, I mean, here's what I like about Chicago. I'm rambling here. Here's what I like about Chicago is we have really yet to see this team at its best strength. Yasmani Grandal was injured. Luis Robert was injured. Eloy Jimenez is injured. A lot of their top players in the middle of the lineup, they haven't played together for a long period yet. That's what I really like about Chicago is I don't think we've seen this team at its best. And that's a scary thought considering they just won the American League Central.
Right. Going back to the Padres, going into the year, they had, it seemed like too many starting pitching options, Darvish, Musgrove, Snell, Paddock, Morhone, Lamet, Mackenzie Gore maybe, coming. Obviously Clevenger wasn't going to, be healthy, but they still had plenty of options. Ryan Weathers, and now to end the year, it's going to be two guys, Darvish and Musgrove. So, I guess the question for me, to you is how big, or what would you point to? Would it be the rotation? Would that be that number one reason why they weren't, able to have success this year, whether there was injuries or guys just not performing the way that they were expected to?
I hate to pinpoint it on one aspect because I think it was a combination of things. A lot of people are pointing fingers at AJ Preller and Jayce Tingler. I think you can definitely put some blame on AJ for the trade deadline. It's not necessarily that he failed; he just lost. I mean, there's winners and losers in this league, and I was enjoying my honeymoon at the time when the trade deadline was going on. When I went to sleep, Max Scherzer was going to be donning a Padres jersey. When I woke up the next morning, Max Scherzer was all of a sudden going to be donning a Dodger blue thread. I mean, that's killer. Not only do you lose Max Scherzer, but you lose him to the team you're competing in a division with. That's tough. And so again, you have to play. That's his job. It's AJ Preller's job. He's a general manager. There are winners and losers, and he lost a trade deadline. But that said, going into the season, I mean, you just mentioned all those starting pitching options that they had. From Morahone, you're hoping Mackenzie Gore could be an option. He was not. So I don't want to put all the blame on AJ here, because he did build a pitching staff that, at least going into the season on paper, you think, okay, they're going to have 6, 7, 8 different options in that starting rotation. As it turned out, they had injuries. Blake Snell ended up hitting the IL. Yu Darvish was pitching with a bad back. It's kind of funny when in hindsight, it's always 2020. But when Joe Musgrove was acquired, he was really the kind of the back burner. Nobody was really, I mean, people were paying attention to it. But when you acquire a guy like Blake Snell and Yu Darvish, 2 Cy Young candidates, all of a sudden you acquire Joe Musgrove. People are like, no big deal. Joe Musgrove was their best player start to finish this past season. Thank God, if you're a Padres fan, thank God for Joe Musgrove this season, because where would they have been? I mean, who knows where they would have been without Joe Musgrove. So I don't want to put it on one guy. I don't want to put it on one aspect either. The lineup didn't hold up there. They didn't hold their own weight, frankly. They were middle of the pack much of the season. They really struggled getting their leadoff hitter on. Going into, this was last week, I don't have the stat in front of me as of the updated stat, but as of last week, their leadoff hitters were batting .229. And I'm not talking about the number one in the order. I'm talking about any time in the order, but starting off an inning. Their leadoff hitters were hitting .229. That's last in the National League. So they weren't getting their leadoff hitters on either. So again, I'm in a rambling mood today, but the point is, it was a number of things. You could blame it on the manager. Jayce Tingler was outmanaged at times. You could blame it on the lineup for not getting their leadoff hitter on, and you could blame it on the pitching staff for just not being healthy.
Yeah. You talked about the trade deadline. What surprised you most about it? Was that they didn't just they didn't get any starting pitching at all, or the fact that they were, rumored to, Preller didn't say they were close, but they were rumored to be close, obviously on Scherzer, and they struck out on him. Was it just that they literally didn't get anyone, like a Kenta Maeda or anyone?
Yeah, that's fair to say. You got to have a succession plan. You got to have a concession plan. And he didn't do that. I mean, the injury issues were piling up. You had a bullpen that had accumulated the most innings in the National League at the time. So you had a bullpen that, you don't want to say banged up yet, but Drew Pomeranz was on the IL all season long. Emilio Pagan really lost a step as the season went on. So you could see that the bullpen, I think the writing was kind of on the wall, that you needed some more starting pitching help, because Mackenzie Gore was not showing that he was going to be an option. So I think you can, again, this is more blame being pointed to AJ Preller. But once you don't get Max, again, you have to have a concession plan. It may be Tyler Anderson, some of these lower guys that can just chew up innings and give you 5-6 innings, a quality start here and there. What ended up happening is they ended up having to not only not get Max Scherzer, but you had no option B, no option C. You had to go all the way to like option D and E of looking to the free agent market and getting guys like Jake Arrieta and Vince Velasquez. Just not good, especially with that division, the Giants, the Dodgers. And that's another reason for, I think, why San Diego struggled this year is I don't think anybody, including San Diego, expected San Francisco to have such a good ball club this season. I mean, that really came out of left field. I mean, they had their eyes set on Los Angeles before the season, as the season went on, and the Giants just sustained success all season long. So that was just kind of another low blow, really, for this Padres squad.
Yeah. Preller, recently reshuffled the front office, with Sam Geeney and, Mark Connor. What were your thoughts kind of on that? Just, it felt to me more like eyewash, like, okay, Manny and Tatis were fighting. Okay, Tingler's job's up in the air. Here, we're going to do something over here to make you talk a little bit about that.
When you have a team that has expectations placed upon them for the season, and not only do you fall short, but you fall well short of those expectations, you're going to have movement. That's the name of the game. It's baseball, it's professional sports. So when you have a guy like AJ Preller who's very aggressive, he has, I don't want to say a good resume, because the moves he has made, they haven't really panned out quite well, but he's been able to acquire a lot of talent. So you can make that case for him. So he's not going to be target number one, at least when he's put into power. And I think the Padres still believe in AJ Preller, but AJ Preller's, like I said, he's very aggressive. somebody's going to have to take the blame. At first, it was Larry Rothschild, which that's kind of another conversation for another day, whether he's to blame. I personally don't believe he was the culprit of all their problems this season. But at first, it's Larry Rothschild, then it was scouting department. Again, blame has to be placed somewhere. I'm not hearing this at all. This is completely suspicion here, but I would be shocked if Jayce Tingler was managing the Padres next season. Like I said, expectations comes pressure. And Jayce Tingler, unfortunately, did not manage this team to the playoffs this year. They fell well short of those expectations. So I would be shocked to see Jayce Tingler managing the Padres next year.
Yeah, and that's kind of leads me to my next question. Who would you say is at the top of the list then, to replace Tingler if, a movement was made?
Yeah, it's still early on. The candidates are, we still don't know what managers are going to be sticking around. There could be a manager currently managing a team right now that the Padres really like. Maybe AJ really likes. This would be quite the stunning move by Chris Woodward type guy. I don't know if Texas is going to let a guy like Chris Woodward go, but I'm just kind of blowing smoke here. Maybe there is a guy out there that they could be interested in. We don't really know the full list. But we kind of, shuffle this around on a recent podcast with Bruce Bochy. Obviously that name comes to mind. He has not shot down the idea of managing again.
Yeah, he kept it open. Yeah.
Exactly. He has managing experience, a lot of managing experience in San Diego, found success in San Diego. And there's a guy named Tony La Russa who has done a fine job being a old traditional, not necessarily a player's manager, and he's done a fine job in Chicago leading the White Sox to a division title this year. So I think this new era of baseball really, everybody looks at the young guys, the Aaron Boones, the Gabe Kaplers, the player managers, the analytically driven managers. But maybe this is a team when you have a young squad, maybe it's a team that dictates a manager with more of a traditional style, like Tony La Russa, like a Bruce Bochy. I don't know. I think the list is still filling itself out, but it should be interesting.
Yeah, because if you read Kevin Acey's article in the San Diego Union Tribune, he was talking about how there were some players in the clubhouse that, didn't even want Tingler as the manager to start out with. And that kind of, caused me to question, like, okay, so if that was the case, did Preller, talk to players about, having input about who the next manager is going to be? Because I think asking Manny Machado, hey, do you think this Jayce Tingler guy's, going to work here? Or asking, veterans. And I'm not saying you have to go ask Eric Hosmer, but I'm saying just guys that are going to be there and are leaders in the clubhouse. Maybe it's a good idea to ask them and get some input. Not saying that they have to have the final decision, but I think that's something. I don't know about you, but that's something that if Tingler does get fired, I think players' input is going to have to take place.
That's a really good point. And the Angels are a really good example of that too. When the Angels fired their general manager and they had a front office shift before this last season, the Angels had a talk with Mike Trout about what they should do, what he thinks of Perry Minasian, who they ended up hiring. So yeah, there's definitely too just asking your star players, what their opinion is on things. I was able to have a conversation with AJ Preller before the season. It's a very open book. He's very personable. He's very humane, if you will. Obviously, there was a story when Tatis was coming up. There was the idea that they were going to keep him down for service time manipulation. Manny Machado went into that front office and said, we need this kid up right now. Mm-hmm. So clearly, AJ is open to having those conversations with his players. He's a younger general manager. Like I said, he's very he's got kind of a younger style and a younger personality. So he's able to relate with a lot of these younger players. So I think you'd definitely be open to that. And to your point, I think it would be a smart idea to ask your star players, guys that are on long contracts like Tatis, Machado. It'd be a good idea to kind of get their opinion on things.
Yeah. All right. Last one here with the MVP race. Fernando has 41 home runs this year. Obviously, I still, I might be biased, but I still have him as the MVP. I think moving positions and then moving back just so, that could help the team win, keep him healthy, definitely should be, taken into account. But with that said, Bryce Harper's having one heck of a year now with Philadelphia. And if Philly, they're probably gonna have to sweep Atlanta this week. But if they get into the playoffs, do you think Bryce has a pretty good, case over Fernando for the MVP?
So I won't say this is my personal opinion. I will say if Bryce Harper and the Phillies sneak in, it would be shocking if Bryce Harper did not win the MVP for that simple reason. Because I think right now you can go through each statistical category, and I think Tatis, Soto, and Bryce Harper, really those three guys are kind of your front runners right now. And I've gone through so many different statistical categories, and I've gone through each one trying to figure out, okay, who has a leg up here? All three of those guys, fantastic hitters, all have had great hitting seasons, power-wise, RBI-wise, like OPS-wise. If you go on that deep dive analytics, all three of those guys have had monster seasons. Defensively, neither of those guys are very good. So you can't really, when comparing those guys, you can't really give either guy a leg up defensively either, because neither of them are that great defensively, at least not numbers-wise. So then you kind of have to look at, okay, we're splitting hairs at this point. What do we look at next? We looked at defense, we looked at offense, and we're still even. Okay, look at your team results. And I hate doing this in baseball because we're going to have a guy like Shohei Ohtani who's on a losing ball club. He's going to win an American League MVP despite his team not being very good. And so I hate putting MVP cases on the line here and looking at team results. But this is a very unique case in that we have three candidates that are, neck and neck. You could count the statistical categories that each of these guys lead in, and it'd be very, very close to even. And so I think at this point, it's fair to say that we can look at the team results. When we can look, let's say the Phillies do sneak in, it would be really hard to not give it to Bryce Harper when you have three candidates that are neck and neck in statistical categories, but one guy is on the playoff team. It would be really hard not to give it to Bryce Harper.
Okay, what about this then? So let's say, the Phillies get in. Obviously, the Nats aren't in. So let's just say it's, Bryce against Fernando. And Fernando does his part this week, to help really knocks out the Dodgers for that division, for tonight, tomorrow, next day. And then, into that San Francisco, he has a good week. Does that still mean that Bryce would, take it home?
Yeah, I believe that holds some weight. Absolutely. That's kind of why I preempted that last point, that it wasn't my personal opinion. It was more so out of what the writers might do. Because I haven't made up my mind yet. I have to see how the season turns out first. If you were to ask me to make an MVP vote right now, I just don't think it would be fair to vote right now, because I think there's just, believe it or not, this last week, there's too many games to be played to make a decision in my mind. So yeah, to your point, I think this week and what Tatis is able to do against the Dodgers this season, or this next week, that's going to be huge. What Harper does against Atlanta in this big time NL East matchup, that's huge. So yeah, to your point, I think this week is going to be, it's probably going to dictate not only the season for a lot of these squads, but the MVP race as well.
Yeah. All right. This has been episode 63 of the Talking Friars podcast with Danny Vietti. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ben. Appreciate it.